Bob's Burgers is one of my favorite shows. Not every episode is great, but the show rarely fails to at least put a smile on my face. I actually have a favorite episode that I'm planning to do a future video on, so stay tuned for that. This video, however, is about another episode, which on the surface may not seem like anything special. It's Season 8, Episode 21, entitled Something Old, Something New, Something Bob Caters for You. As the title implies, the story centers around the Belcher family catering a wedding. If you haven't seen it and you don't want me to spoil it, then you should watch it before watching this. In typical Bob's Burgers fashion, the episode is funny, heartfelt, surprisingly insightful, and very cleverly written, more clever even than might be immediately apparent. At the heart of the story is a really cool narrative trick called the bait and switch. If you've heard that term before, it's probably because it's been around for a long time and actually has more than one meaning. It originated as a legal term that describes a form of fraud. The way it works is a store will advertise a great product at a rock bottom price, that's the bait that gets you in the door, but when you try to buy it, the store will pretend they just ran out and then try to switch you onto something more expensive that they were trying to sell all along. It's a pretty slimy trick that's technically illegal. Now, the purpose of this channel is to explore what makes a good story, so obviously I'm more concerned with the literary definition, which isn't set in stone, but it's basically when a story gives you an expectation that is then subverted, which sounds simple enough. I kind of touched on this before in another video that was all about setups and payoffs, the setup being what you expect to happen, and the payoff being what actually does.
Rocco, sit on the other side. You blocked the rearview mirror.
Some of the scenes I talk about in that would qualify as bait and switch, like this one from The Godfather. We're given the expectation that Rocco is going to get whacked, only to find out that Rocco's the one who did the whacking.
Technically.
This scene from Silence of the Lambs, however, though it is an example of setup and payoff, wouldn't qualify as a bait and switch because our expectation that Hannibal is going to get this pen is later confirmed rather than subverted, and the bait and switch always subverts. It also usually happens pretty fast. The website tvtropes.org has an exhaustive list of bait and switches that I really enjoyed reading through and that I'll link to in the description. Some of these I'd never heard of, but there were plenty of familiar favorites like the innocent innuendo bait and switch, where you think the characters are discussing something risque.
Nice beaver.
Thank you. I just had it stuffed.
When instead it's completely mundane, like this scene in The Naked Gun, or this one from Wonder Woman.
What's that?
It's a, it's a watch.
Another favorite of mine is the decoy protagonist bait and switch, where you think a main character has just been introduced when they really haven't, like in this episode of The Simpsons.
Leopold. All right, you listen up, you little freaks. Fun stops here. You're gonna shut your stinking traps and behave, damn it. This is one substitute you're not gonna screw with. Marge Simpson.
One of the most well-known bait and switches is the infamous gunshot bait and switch, where a gunshot rings out and a character flinches like they've just been shot when really it's someone else who got hit, like in this classic scene from Raiders. Also in Raiders is what I call the boss fight bait and switch, where it looks like the hero is about to get his ass kicked, but instead it winds up being the easiest fight ever. Again, these are all taking place pretty quickly. The bait and switch doesn't require a lot of time. It doesn't even really require a story. You can have a bait and switch in a commercial.
Because television can make anything look delicious.
Now you might be thinking, wait a second, if a bait and switch is just a setup that gives you an expectation that is later subverted, then what's the difference between that and a plot twist? That's a good question. The two have a lot in common. You could even argue that a bait and switch is just a plot twist that happens quickly. Take Gordon's fake death in The Dark Knight. I know I've talked about this before ad nauseum, but it's the first plot twist that popped in my head. As we all know, Gordon at one point appears to be fatally shot. That's the setup. And later, he's dramatically revealed to still be alive. That's the payoff. This is considered a twist because it changes what we thought was the plot. However, if we found out Gordon was still alive right at the end of this scene, which I think should have been the case, then this would be considered more of a bait and switch. But that begs an interesting question. Is the length of time between setup and payoff the only difference between these two narrative devices? I would say no, and the reason for that goes back to this Bob's Burgers episode.
Well, took you long enough.
Here, the setup and payoff takes place over the course of the entire story. It goes like this. A young couple shows up at the restaurant and asks Bob and Linda to cater their wedding because the restaurant is where they had their first date.
That is kind of touching.
Bob and Linda agree, but when Linda learns they've only been together for a short while, she realizes their marriage is doomed because they're going too fast. As she so eloquently puts it,
3 months? You haven't been in a fight yet. And if you did, it was cute. And you haven't even smelled each other's farts.
on the day of the wedding, Linda seems to be proven right. Everything that can go wrong does. It's so windy that everything blows away. No one can hear the wedding vows being exchanged. The poetic gesture to release a bunch of live butterflies goes horribly wrong.
Everyone just toss your dead butterfly into the air and they'll look alive.
1, 2, 3!
Oh God.
And the nail in the coffin comes when Bob, in true Bob fashion, wrecks the wedding cake.
God. No!
Linda, all the while, can see where this is going, and we can see it right along with her. The couple get closer and closer to their breaking point until they break, just like we expected. Except that doesn't actually happen. Instead, Linda realizes that she was wrong. The young couple actually handled all these mini disasters really well.
You two are gonna make it.
We are?
The way you handled everything today shows how all you really care about is each other.
It's a great surprise that subverts our expectations. Alright, so why would this be considered a bait and switch rather than a plot twist, despite the considerable time between setup and payoff? For me, it's because everything is happening right in front of us. If you go back to Gordon's fake death, the story is concealing a lot. It's basically lying to us. It's hiding that Gordon is secretly alive, which makes it incredibly difficult for us to figure out what's really going on. Bob's Burgers, however, isn't really hiding anything, which as far as I'm concerned makes the payoff in the end a lot more impressive. Everything happens out in the open. We could have seen where this was going all along. All we had to do was pay close attention and think for ourselves. Yet, speaking for myself, I didn't do that, and the main reason is Linda. Thanks to her, I fell victim to what's known as confirmation bias. This is when you only accept evidence that confirms what you already believe while ignoring evidence that contradicts how you feel. Linda watches all this bad luck befall the bride and groom and takes that as evidence their marriage won't last.
Pretty windy out here. It's almost as if God is whispering, 3 months is not long enough.
While ignoring that this young couple actually handles all their misfortunes really well without ever losing faith in each other. Even when the bride finally breaks down in the end after learning that on top of everything else the wedding cake was destroyed, her new husband remains supportive, which is what finally gets Linda to realize she was wrong, which is also when most of us watching realize that we were wrong as well. And that's what I find so clever about this episode. Without Linda, I doubt I would have viewed this young couple with any negative bias. I probably just would have been like, hey, they're getting married, good for them. But since Linda is the protagonist of this episode, I viewed the story from her point of view. Her prejudice became mine, so not only is the episode insightful into what makes a good marriage, it knows that if the right people commit to each other, it doesn't matter how short their engagement is, and that if the wrong people try to make it work, it won't matter how much time they put in.
Sally's gonna make a great mom. She's been treating me like a child for years.
But it's not just the story itself that's insightful. The way the story is told understands human psychology. We all think of ourselves as these perfectly rational, independent thinkers, when in reality we're heavily influenced by those around us, often without even realizing it. Under the right circumstances, unless we're careful, the way we feel isn't necessarily up to us, which is worth keeping in mind. Since Bob's Burgers is such a lighthearted show that's so easy to watch, you'd be forgiven for thinking the episodes themselves must be easy to write. But I seriously doubt that's the case. As the old saying goes, if it was easy to read, you can bet it was damn difficult to write. I mean, this episode, which is just one out of well over 200 and counting, contains so much more than meets the eye. There's so much to appreciate, which is why I give the creative team behind this show a lot of credit.
You farted on our second date.
Because I knew you were the one.
Sitting on my lap, just for the record.
You loved it.